Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel, and this is a Bigfoot class. We're coming up for summer vacation pretty soon, so the class is going to be winding down quickly. But this one is a good one. I spent a lot of time preparing this, and I went through a lot of old material to bring you some things that I guarantee none of you have seen. And they all come out of Ray Crow's research. Couple things. First of all, got some comments this week from people saying, you know, Dave, I like your research, but that Patterson-Gimlin film, never buy it. Don't believe it. So I was thinking really hard about this. And do you know that every researcher that I know in the Bigfoot world, alive or dead, believes that that footage is of a real Bigfoot biped? Everyone. I don't know anybody who doesn't believe it. So when people make those statements, I'm a little flustered, because before I'd ever make a statement like that on a public venue, I would research every angle of it so I could support my belief. These people that make these blanket statements for you to read, they trouble me because they're meant to sway somebody's opinion out there. Otherwise, why would you post it? I'm not going to try to convince anybody at this stage about the Patterson-Gimlin footage. But I'm just airing out to you that when I started in this, I read all these posts as well. Oh, it's a man in a suit. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. It's not any of that. And when I read that John Green took that footage to Los Angeles and met with the head of Disney Studios, and they said that they're the best costume designers in the world and we couldn't make a costume that good. And if we ever did make a costume like that, we sure as heck wouldn't have made a female costume because it's way too hard to get everything balanced and swaying the right way, meaning the breasts. So that was some of the most compelling evidence. But then I'm going to read to you something that was said by the Smithsonian director about that film. And these are people that spent their time looking at it and researching it. And since then, again, I'm not going to go over this a lot, but Monster Quest was a series that was on TV for a long time. Doug Hychek was the executive director. Doug's a brilliant man. And they did motion studies of the Bigfoot and how it moved. And they could not get a human body to move like that. You say, well, Dave, we saw it. No, it's the way the foot touches the ground, the way it lifts off the ground, and the way it moves. Just the facts. So a couple things. I'm going to start off almost like in an entertainment venue to get you up to speed on some things. And in Ray's research, Ray Crow, 1967-68, Roger Patterson and his footage was on the Joey Bishop show. Joey Bishop was a competitor like Johnny Carson for that time slot. And this is actually a photo. And if a lot of people have never seen Roger Patterson, this is him, Joey Bishop, and they're discussing the film. Now, why is this important? Because I don't believe if it was an easily construed hoax that a big national venue like Joey Bishop would put him on and realistically discuss it. So that's just for starters. Now, some of the photos in Ray's research are just out of this world. And one of the men, I've always talked about this, and this is Peter Byrne. And they were having a weenie roast at Ray's, and Peter showed up a lot. Now, Peter ran one of the first research teams on Bigfoot that was supported academically ever. He ran it out of the Dalles in Oregon, right on the Columbia River. If you ever get a chance, if you ever hear of Peter being out, he's really old now, but you need to meet him. An ultimate gentleman. And oddly, Peter's one of those guys who never had a Bigfoot sighting. Almost everybody I know in the Bigfoot world has had a sighting that wants to call themselves a researcher. Now, this photo that I'm going to show you next was from Peter and part of his research team. It came from Northern California in 1979. I'm going to show you this for a reason. So here's the photo. Here's the toes impression. Comes out to the bottom of the heel and goes up. It's almost a perfect impression. Now, many people would discount this if they saw it. They'd say, "No, Dave, the toes are too accurate, too perfect. Heel's too perfect." A couple of things about this. When a Bigfoot puts its toe onto the ground, it puts it straight down. This is the part that's different and hard to understand when you compare it to a human print. It goes straight down with all of its weight. So when it went straight down with all of its weight, it also came straight back with all of its weight, thus making almost a perfect print. Also, all of these prints show extreme weight. I've been at scenes before where I weigh 200 pounds and I could jump up at the air. Sometimes I've dropped from like 4 or 5 feet in the air on a rock trying to see how far down I could compress my print, and it would never come close to that Bigfoot print. Even though many people guesstimate that the Bigfoot in the Patterson-Gimlin film weighed 800 to 1,000 pounds, still we could never get close to making it. There's something about that weight that can't be explained. Now, the next bit of evidence, I'm going to read it to you. This is a note that came with it. It says, name is Jerry Johnson, living in Snoqualmie, Washington. Concerning the hair sample found on Grouse Ridge, located less than a mile east of Truck Town. Location is alone near a Buddhist temple on the north side of a clear cut above a large something where the ridge leveled off. 20 feet on side is a vine maple patch. Budapest, the Buddhist temple has not been built at the time of the find. Time estimation end of July 93. Time of day is dusk. No one was with me. My reaction when I first spotted the site, it was obviously a nesting site, quite large, 3-foot oval in diameter. Trying to read it, I can't. I've never seen anything like this. Very odd, out of place, no smell present, no tracks, no noise, no answer to why it was here. I always felt it was been a llama or a sheep. But to me in the area, no such animal had been seen and no sign of animal or tracks. Within a month of the find, I took a sample to Fish and Game Officer Rocky Spencer. He took it to the Mill Creek office, main headquarters for the area. No one had any idea what it came from. Their analysis, not native to the area, not bear, elk, deer, cougar, bobcat, or coyote. I've showed it to my hunting friends. No one has an answer. I was at the site less than 5 minutes and I have not been back since. Jerry Johnson, July 27th, 97. This was found in one of the dozens of boxes I got from Mr. Crow. And I'm going to show you what it is. This is some kind of hair sample. Now, personally, I've never seen anything quite like this. Most Bigfoot hair doesn't come in clumps like this. It usually comes in independent, longer hair. Although this has some of the similarities of Bigfoot hair because it's very kinky. Bigfoot hair is usually thicker. This is a little finer. Now, maybe this came from a juvenile. I don't know. But I thought the story was unique. The idea that Fish and Game couldn't analyze it was special. And I wanted you to get a look at it to understand that not everything is identifiable in the woods. Here's another look here. So, I have a lot of this kind of stuff. And again, people say, well, Dave, why don't you go send it out to get it tested? It's unimportant to me. I've already gone through all the hair testing I've ever done in my life. I'm never going to do it again. I'm 100% positive that in our DNA project, we identified all the hairs we need to identify. 110 different samples, hair, saliva, blood, etc. We've got identified DNA, and if you go back in the classes, you can watch it and you could understand it. More stuff. Right, here's a complimentary color section typeset though. If you ever want anything, let me know. Now this is a booklet that was made and nobody ever signed it. But these I'm going to read you some things from it that are important. Now it says Tom Morris, Bigfoot Investigations. No idea where this is from. But this is really important because I want you to see that there's some credible stuff coming through here. So, these photos here, this is really important, folks. Pay attention. These are photos of a Bigfoot trackway. Notice the tracks are one right in front of the other. Same with this one. Different angle, different angle. If you see Bigfoot tracks staggered off to a side, forget it. This is a Bigfoot trackway. One right in front of the other. And when I saw this one in the research, I said, I got to show this to the audience. This is important stuff. It says this is, I'll read you what it says underneath. Midday, early afternoon. Now we had good light and a better angle, but the tracks had really melted away by now, very distorted in comparison to the 2 a.m. photos. Usually straight pattern, almost mechanical looking. Note our tire tracks where we pulled forward past our original stopping point. This is a very primitive Forest Service road in the Trinity National Forest, Northern California. I very rarely see a vehicle on it, even in the summer. We are about 15 miles from a paved road where it's remote to begin with. These tracks, whatever made them, led to a primitive canyon-like area. It was an eerie feeling venturing up there at 2 a.m. I regret these pictures being such poor quality. Looking back at this, I'm sure you will agree it would be advisable to be equipped and prepared, not to mention the more photographic experience, the better. The segment I photos had more detail. If you can really only make out the stride in comparison with mine, segment 3, after the amount of melting and distortion, it's hard to make out anything. I can only imagine how ready and prepared you would have been. This is again to Ray. And then show you these pictures in a second. This is what it says. It says dung photos. Obviously from something large, possibly a bear, though usually bear is small, dark clumps in a big pile. These pictures do point out how hard and rocky terrain won't retain photos or tracks. So this is good in the sense that they had the hindsight to put or the wherewithal to put a ruler next to the scat. My guess, bear, for a multitude of reasons. I've seen bear scat just like this. I've seen bear scat bigger than this. But this is a good way to photograph. I'd probably put the ruler on the ground, stand over the top, and take a picture of it. Also, it's important if you could open this up and get some light on the scat, because I'd like to see what they're eating. Most of the time when I'm out in the woods and I'm looking at bear scat in the summer, it's filled with berries. My guess is that was bear scat. So, one thing that a lot of people don't put, but I do in all of my work, is I put the elevation, because that's important. This is another picture of the Patterson-Gimlin incident. This is the Bluff Creek drainage area. The area that the biped is walking in is gravel, but it's pretty fine gravel and almost sand in spots. You can barely see it, but there's a bulge on that right thigh. Right there. And that bulge is a serious injury. And very unusual to find something like this and get such great pictures and show such a serious injury. She wasn't didn't appear to be hurt, but when you magnify this, you can really see it. This is part of the report that was written by this individual. This is another good picture of some scat. It says 20-inch Bigfoot dropping from Swillup, Swillup Creek in California. Now, if you look at this, that's a pretty good picture, and it's a pretty big piece of scat. Very odd, because a couple of things. If this was a bear scat, it'd be really unusual. Bears usually drop scat on top of each other, so it wouldn't be one long piece like this. But if you look real close, the scat appears to be almost packed with berries. And that can be bear, and it can be a Bigfoot, because a lot of Bigfoot sightings are around berry bushes. That's why I picked that one out for you. Now this next one, scientific police procedure is exemplified by special material used to cast footprint in what is believed to be a Skamania ape creature. Here shown against yardstick background, illustrating 22 inches long. Sheriff Bill Klausner remembered specialized instruction for retrieving footprints from snow. When prints were reported by Mrs. John Durrell of Vancouver, rather than using plaster of Paris, which creates heat upon drying, the sheriff used molten sulfur to cast a print. Brilliant. Hot sulfur dries immediately upon contact with the air and is police prescription for taking footprints in the snow. Remember that. You just learned something from Dave that no one else is going to tell you. Kind of the picture of the cast and the story behind it. Again, I'll tell you that again. Don't use plaster of Paris in the snow. The sheriff was using a sulfur ingredient, molten sulfur. Next picture, classic. Bigfoot Research Association representation from the cast made by Skamania County Sheriff Bill Klausner and Deputy Jack Wright from footprint impressed in snow near Bear Creek. Lynch and Wiggins have formed an association with others to capture the ape-like creature. Ha ha ha. Never going to happen. That's the gentleman with their cast. So I'm going to show you something I doubt anyone has ever seen. And it's super, super unusual. This is a pamphlet from the Bigfoot Research Organization ran by Peter Byrne. I'm going to show you it. I doubt anyone has ever seen it. So the first page, when you open up the pamphlet, this is what it says. Project is benign scientific investigation designed to prove the existence of a large bipedal, hair-covered hominid believed to be living in the forested regions of the Pacific Northwest. The project, conducted in association with the Academy of Applied Science in Boston, Mass., is the most professional and sophisticated approach ever attempted on the subject. Next page. The evidence supports the reality of Bigfoot, has its foundations in 4 basic areas: history, sightings, 67 film, footprints, and finds. Credible sightings are a vital part of the evidence. Sightings are rare, only a few each year, indicating extreme wariness on the part of the creatures combined with a skilled ability to use the physical features. 67 film, a short piece of 16mm film shot in Northern California in October 67, is to date the only believable photographic record of a real living Bigfoot. A recent discovery by the Bigfoot Research Project of the similarity of a footprint found in the same area 6 years prior to the shooting of the film sequence further supports the credibility. What is known to date? Although many years of research into the Bigfoot phenomenon now lie behind us, much of what we believe we now comes mainly from prudent speculation. The reason for this lies in the extreme difficulty in actually studying the creature. Here's what they stated at the time. It's nomadic, nocturnal. I don't believe it's nocturnal, but they did at the time. Forested mountains of the Northwest. It's an omnivore. Height over 6 feet. Weight 500 pounds or greater. Strength far in excess of man. Eyesight, superb visual proficiency. Smell, highly developed capability. Hearing, exceptional acuity. Demeanor, inoffensive, shy, non-aggressive. Locomotion, bipedal. Now, why did I show this to you? Why did I show this to you? Because the Academy of Applied Sciences thought the topic compelling enough to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at the time into research on a topic that most people knew nothing about. But they had people that were giving them information that they wanted to have more credible information about. So they went to a hunter, a world-renowned hunter. Peter was a tiger hunter from India. And they thought that, well, he could track, he could do the research. He was a kindly person. He is a kindly person. And that's kind of how it got started. Show you a picture of something. Show you a picture of a lot of things. See this right here? Anybody know what that is? Anybody ever seen that before? Human, not an ape, not a gorilla. Looks more human, doesn't it? Talk about this later. This was called the Deloy monster of 1927. Supposedly captured in British Columbia near a train track. Captured, unknown what happened to it, but that is one strange looking thing. Supposedly bipedal. Ray had several drawings come in that were exceptional that I want to show you. That is one exceptional drawing. Whoever the artist was, there's no name to it, was a great drawing. Very fine. Doesn't look like an animal to me. I'll read this next one to you. says, enclosed you'll find 2 drawings that John Horrigan hired me to do. I asked if he minded if I pass them on to you for use in the track record, and he said, go for it. This one is from a description on tape he gave me, and the other is a Roger chasing Patterson. So this is one that was seen in 1986 of Bigfoot. Again, if you take the hair off it, it looks like a human. There were a ton of drawings. I'm going to show you a series of them that were done and that were in the book. This one actually looks like a drawing that Harvey Pratt did in the Hoopa Project. The drawing is phenomenally close. Now, there was no info on where the drawing came from. It was just in this giant satchel that Ray gave me as part of the research. Again, another drawing, no information about it. But it shows the varying appearances. This is another one to me that looks very human. Now, there were letters in the research that were important. This was attached to a letter that Peter Byrne wrote, and this is what initiated the letter in response. Jungle humanoids. The PTI report date-lined Dibrugarb, May 24, 75, contains the following interesting information. A pair of strange humanoid creatures were captured by the tribal people of Kamti Forest in Arunachal Pradesh yesterday. It's in India. Giving the information, Mr. R. Das, superintendent of the police of the Dibrugarh district, Upper Assam, adjoining Arunachal Pradesh, said today the height of the creatures, a male and female, was estimated at 10 feet. Mr. Das said the administration was making necessary arrangements to send the creatures to the Tazu district, headquarters of Tirop in the Unizon territory. It may be recalled that apart from the Yeti, abominable snowman of the Himalayas, the Americas also have a tradition of giant humanoid creatures. And then Peter wrote this letter. I have tons of he made copies of all the letters he wrote, and they're in the research. I'm writing to you concerning a report that we saw in a newspaper here recently to the effect that 2 wild creatures, or wild men, or jungle munchies, were captured in the jungles of Arun Pradesh by the Kamti people in that area, and that they were very large, about 10 feet in height. The date of the report is May 24, 75. The date of Peter's letter was June of 76. I shall be most grateful to you for some information on the report. If there's a possibility of any pictures of the creatures, it would indeed help. Thank you for your assistance. There was nothing in the file that there was a response to Peter's letter. But again, I found it interesting that it came out of the Himalayas. Now this is fascinating, to say the least. I have no idea where this department they're talking about is or was. I'm just going to read to you. It looks like a teletype. I'll show it to you. It says, reported to this department by C.H. Chambers of Gerber, California. While on his way to work in Elk Creek, he hit an animal of approximately 10 feet in height that resembled a monkey. He stated the animal came from the north side of the road, heading south when he struck it upon his pickup. It ran completely over this animal. He lost control of his pickup and spun around. After gaining control of his pickup, he and his passenger of Red Bluff returned to where he struck the animal and could not find it. Mr. Chambers was asked by the sheriff's office deputy if it could have been a deer, and he stated no. It walked on 2 legs and was from 8 to 10 feet tall. Sheriff's office determined there was no damage to his pickup and checked the area where the incident occurred with negative results. There it is. I find this fascinating. I have no idea where this came from, but it was something official. So I wanted you to hear it. Now, some people want to dismiss the Bigfoot topic, and they don't want to engage it at any level because it doesn't fit with their paradigm. But what if I told you that other educational institutions were interested in this topic? And they were. This is a letter written from Notre Dame University, College of Science, August 1st, 1976, to Peter Byrne. I'm writing to you with a sincere offer of assistance in your endeavor to find Bigfoot. Here in our area, we have a nucleus of 3 people, myself, a biology grad student, and a chief naturalist at a private nature conservancy in Michigan, who have deeply interested in the problem of monsters for many years, but because of our location, it's been difficult for us to take an active role. We're all fully read on the subject and have been over the problem of obtaining evidence to convince the scientific community many times. It has occurred to us over the past several years, and again after reading your book, that what is sorely needed is a complete computerized data bank of Bigfoot sightings along with time, weather, habitat, etc., and other observations. Read the Hoopa Project, read Tribal Bigfoot. I did all of that. Of course, your information center is the first step in this direction. Once all this information has been punched on cards, a variety of manipulations can be carried out. We can run cross correlations between different sets of variables, etc. I think you know what I'm saying. It's mostly stuff that can be done by hand, but computer can go a long way to saving time. Basically, we are offering is the total computer facility at the University of Notre Dame to build a national Bigfoot data bank from which further analysis might be made. In addition, any biological expertise we might be able to offer for interpretation. This would be our way of getting involved in the search and at the same time providing a service to you and your people in the Dalles. I've spoken to our department chairman at some length, and you have received clearance for free computer time and for student help on the project. If you're interested in exploring this with us further and you have not already obtained access to a computer facility, please let us know. I assure you we couldn't be more sincere about the offer or more serious about the project. Further, we couldn't be more upset at the general lack of concern shown by the biologists of this country with regard to the Bigfoot question. It's clearly time that some took part. We look forward to your quick response. Richard W. Green, Associate Professor of Biology, University of Notre Dame. Can't make this up, friends. A lot of professors in the US and Canada and other parts of the world feel just like Professor Green. They don't want to put their name out there, though. Again, that letter written by Mr. Green was 1976, so he's long out of education, so I don't mind using his name. It's not a private issue at this point. But I know a lot of professors out there don't want their name associated with the topic. They're interested, they're befuddled, they want to do research, but they don't want anyone to know what they're doing, which is kind of a strange conundrum. But that's the reality of the world. And why is that? Because there's so many haters out there, and because the press is trying to manipulate the topic and manipulate what you believe. Isn't that weird? Why would they manipulate anything? Now, what I'm going to show you is a scrapbook written by a lady long since passed, and she sent this scrapbook to Ray. This is the woman, Ola, and I can't even read her last name, and even though the letter is very, very light. But she sent Ray this scrapbook on Bigfoot. And there's several things in here. This is the cover of the scrapbook. There's several things in here that are just absolutely fascinating. First thing is something called the scientific view. This is an article, doesn't say where it's out of. Oh, Argosy Magazine, February 68. The scientific view. Dr. John Napier, Director of Primate Biology Program, Smithsonian Institute. Let me just read you the first paragraph. I'm satisfied that the walk of the creature shown in the film, Patterson-Gimlin film, was consistent with the bipedal striding gait of a man, except in the action of the feet, which were not visible. I have two reservations with both are subjective. First, the slow cadence in the walk and the fluidity of the body movements, particularly the arms, struck me as exaggerated, almost self-conscious in comparison with modern man. Second, my impression that the subject was a male, in spite of the contrary evidence, was its heavy, pendulous breasts. I observed nothing that on a scientific ground would point conclusively to a hoax. That's the head of the Smithsonian, folks. I'm not making this up. And then he went on to discuss many other aspects of it. The creature portrayed is a primate and clearly hominid rather than pongid. Its erect attitude in locomotion, the gait, stride, manner of the locomotion, as well as the relative proportions of pelvic and pectoral limb are all manifestly human. Together with the great development of the mammary glands, that does not, of course, preclude the possibility that it is indeed a Homo sapien masquerading as a hairy giant. All I can say at this stage is that if it was a masquerade, it was extremely well done and effective. Well, as I told you before, Disney Studios said they couldn't do it. So, there's the head of the Smithsonian saying, it's a human, or it's a hominid, not an animal. And there's a story. It says, berry picker met hairy giant near Nelson, British Columbia. Many people are under the impression that stories about Sasquatches are to be found only in Indian legends. This is not so. There are many accounts in which no Indians are involved at all, and by no means do all of these stories date from earlier days. The most recent, to our knowledge, was printed in the Nelson News, October 4th, 1960. Long time ago. Here it goes. Man or beast or both, whatever it was that sent John Bringsley of Nelson fleeing in a blind panic from the head of Lemon Creek, hurling his huckleberry pail into the bush and racing for home in his early model car. It had pulled to a speedy disappearing act by the time the group of hunters returned to the scene. The man, a woodsman, hunter, and fisherman in Kootenai District for more than 35 years, swore on his reputation as an outdoorsman that it was definitely not a bear. In an interview, he related his experience with an unknown creature seen while in a huckleberry picking expedition near 6 Mile and unashamedly told of a frantic race over 100 yards. I had just stopped my 31 coupe on a deserted logging road on a weekends ago and walked about 100 yards into the bush. I was picking huckleberries. I just started to pick the berries and was moving slowly through the bush. I'd only been there about 15 minutes. For no particular reason, I glanced up, and that's where I saw a great beast. It was standing about 50 feet away in a slight rise on the ground. The sight of it paralyzed me. It was 7 to 9 feet tall with long legs and short, powerful arms with hair covering its body. The first thing I thought was, what a strange-looking bear. It had very wide shoulders, flat face, with ears flat against the side of its head. It looked more like a hairy ape. It just stood there staring at me, arms in bent. It was about 8 a.m. Not all sightings are from Native Americans. An interesting point. So, I'll show you the next one, which is interesting to me. That's the picture. Now, it was called the Minnesota Iceman for a while. Some people called it the missing link. Other people called it a hoax. It wasn't a hoax. It was something real. Talk more about that in a second. This is the way the creature was in a sort of a frozen casket. The man who found it had originally said it was found, I think, in Russia. And he changed the story and said he shot it in Minnesota. And it appeared to be shot through the eyes. And there were some researchers who were given access. And to say that they were convinced it was a real creature, but to put it mildly. So you can look online, Minnesota Iceman. It kind of went on the circus route for a while. And then it just disappeared. Nobody could really tell what happened to it. Now, there's a letter in here, and in this packet that was sent to Mr. Crow, there are some newsletters from the Northwest Research Association in Yakima, Washington, which was ran by Roger Patterson. And this is a letter from John Napier, the head of the Smithsonian. Dear Roger, as you know, I have a scientific interest in the Bigfoot problem for a considerable time, and I've always considered Bigfoot the most interesting of all hairy men, because unlike most of the others, Bigfoot is a cast of a human image. The footprints, for instance, of which I have seen a number, are all humanoid. And as far as I can see, without having had the opportunity of studying them closely or for any length of time, they are consistent with the human type of walking gait in soft soil. To me, the factors that make it possible are the likelihood that early humans could have entered America via the Bering Strait. Interesting theory coming from the man who ran the Smithsonian biology program. Again, in a newsletter that Roger ran, it said, a fisherman from Washougal, Don Cox, reported seeing an ape-like creature about 10 feet tall run across the road in front of his car near Beacon Rock. Next, a woman in Vancouver, Washington, named Mrs. John Durrell, and her party of 3 reported gigantic footprints near Bear Creek. Then Sheriff W.R. Klausner took photographs and casts of some of the prints in Bear Creek and reported, some scoffers and laughers have sobered up, including me. Deputy Sheriff Jeffrey Mason went to Cox to the area and found smudged evidence of an animal having leaped up an 8-foot roadside embankment with no definable footprints. However, Mason said the marks did not make those of a deer or an elk or a bear and could not have made that leap. Again, more sheriffs stating the obvious. Now, we were talking about the Minnesota Iceman. I want to read this to you because it's important. This chapter is all about the Iceman. The central figures of the real heroes in the investigation are Ivan Sanderson and Bernard Hevelmans. On December 17, 1968, Sanderson and Hevelmans, a Belgian zoologist and the author of several very excellent books on unknown animals, inspected a creature frozen in a block of ice, enclosed in an insulated coffin maintained by refrigeration. Their visit to Frank Hansen's farm in a remote area of Minnesota near the township of Winona was the result of a tip-off to Sanderson that a strange hominoid creature was being wintered there after a 2-year moderately successful tour of carnival grounds. Hansen received Sanderson and Hevelman in a friendly manner and gave them unrestricted access to the Iceman in a chilly tomb. They spent 2 days studying the creature in the restricted confines of a trailer which the coffin was housed. Space problems made it difficult to photograph the Iceman, but they did. The important point to make at this stage is that both men, both highly experienced and well-informed, accepted the creature on its face value. Hevelman's conviction that what he saw through a sheeting of ice in a cold trailer in the yard of a snowbound farmstead in a remote region was a true-bill unknown hominid. The essence of what Sanderson and Hevelman saw is summarized from their respective papers as follows. General appearance: the body is lying on its back, the right arm over the lower abdomen and the left arm crooked above the head. The knees are slightly bent. Torso appears long and massive, giving the impression of a flowing into the thighs, an appearance which is due presumably by the absence of any outward swelling of the hips. The point being, these men spent 2 days studying it, said it was a real creature. If a zoologist is doing that, I tend to believe it. Now, where did that biped go? That's the million-dollar question. Hansen never told anybody. Now, this book, I've never seen it before, and I think it's extremely valuable. Here it is. It's a paperback. It's called They Walked Among Us, Sick Indians of the Colvilles, as reported by the Spokane and Colville Indians. Second edition. I'm going to read you some of the things that were said in here. It was written by Ed Fush, an anthropologist. The research study is centered on the Spokane and Colville Indian reservations located in the north central and northeast sectors of Washington state. From approximately 55 miles northwest of Spokane, westward to the Okanagan River near Omak, the largest city in the Okanagan County. In this area, the primary and most of the secondary research was conducted. In recent years, much excitement has been generated at the reports of sightings and stories of hominid monsters roaming throughout the mountains and forests of the Pacific Northwest. So that's where Ed got his start. And he decided to focus on their beliefs. Traditional and religious concept of Shwanati. Shwanati, that was the name. Among the Spokane Indians, Sasquatch or Bigfoot was known as Shwanati, which translates to tall, hairy, smells like burnt hair. The following account was extracted from the Rawhide Press, November 82. The Spokane Indians described Shwanati as being about 9 feet tall, possessing a very strong stench, described by many as smelling like wet burnt hair. He was never known to harm human beings, was never seen or caught, and was known to play pranks on people, especially pranks involving horses and dogs. To the Spokane Indians, he was known only as Shwanati. The old-timers among the Spokane Indians had very strong and unshakable beliefs about him. Foremost were, pay attention, belief number one, and the strongest of these beliefs, is that Shwanati was not an animal. This belief stemmed from their traditional religious convictions concerning biblical creation and the beginning of man. In the beginning, 2 sons were born to Adam and Eve. Cain, the first, was born and a rightful heir to all of his father's possessions, was a tiller of the soil. His brother Abel, a keeper of the sheep, was favored by God because of his faithful, inspired blood offerings, which was the custom in those days. Cain became jealous of Abel and slew him. For this action, God judged Cain and found him wanting and cursed him. A fugitive and vagabond shall thou be on earth. He was sentenced to God forever, wander and roam about the world until doomsday, that he could be heard but never seen, and was never again to commit murder. Belief number 2 is that Shwanati that we hear is actually Cain. It was the custom of Indians long ago to set up a hunting camp in the fall of the year as the base of operations where men would hunt, dry fish, etc. Hold on now. Report of incidents involving Shwanati and the Spokane Indians. The west of the Spokane Indian observation believed to have been the habitat of a family of Shwanati, at least during the summer and fishing months, and their presence was known over a period of many years. The area from the present highway to the Columbia River was a favorite fishing camp for the Indians. The Indians customarily gathered here each summer, established a camp, and fished. Fish was known to be a favorite food of the Shwanati, especially when cooked. Therefore, the Indians would cook their heads and parts that they did not want and leave them out for the Shwanati, who would not disturb their fish in camp nor torment their horses and dogs. Shwanati was accepted by the Indians as part of their environment, like the coyote, deer, and bear. He was not considered an animal, but people. First sightings were often frightful, and he was always given a wide berth. No one ever tried to catch or shoot him. After establishment of the reservation family's settlement permanently in this area, etc., etc., etc. We're moving on. Now, one of those incidents involved the headline, Missing Time. An informant reports having ascended a hill in the early hours of the morning as it was beginning to become daylight. He was immediately aware of a strong schwannity stench and saw a shadow of a huge man a short distance away. From that moment on, he remembers nothing that occurred the rest of the day. When awareness returned, it was late afternoon, and he found himself walking back down the same trail and route that he had gone up that morning. He believes that he had been under some sort of hypnosis. Now, let's go back over what we've talked about in the past, the relationship between UFOs and Bigfoot. Abductees claiming abduction by UFOs have missing time quite frequently. Just saying. The Stick Indians of the Colville, Skanecum. Among the various tribes comprising the Colville Federation, Sasquatch was referred to by several names, but a common conceptual thread permeates all those beliefs. He was always considered a human being. This is the Colvilles, a member of their own species. Prior to the arrival of the white men, the only people known to the Indians were other Indians and Sasquatch. Among the Lake Band, he was known as Skanecum, which translates to Stick Indians. Some Indians referred to him as Shwinitum, derived from the original meaning stick equals Indian. To the Wenatchee Indians, he was known as Choanito, meaning night people. Many Indians believed the Skanecum could turn into a tree. This belief derived from their interactions with him. It is reported that a group of Indians followed Skanecum to a ravine along the bottom of which flowed a creek with the usual heavy growth of trees, brush, etc. They sat down on the hillside where they could see the entire area, including the hillside. After a while, when Skanecum did not leave the ravine, some of the Indians went down into the ravine while others maintained vigilance from their vantage point. A complete and thorough search of the ravine yielded no sign of Skanecum, only trees and vegetation. They were certain that he could not have left the area without being seen. No Indian would dare to start chopping into the trees with an axe. Today, the Indians know all too well that Skanecum's color and natural camouflage enables him to stand motionless against a tree and be nearly imperceptible. The number of times that I have taken a report where somebody said they saw a Bigfoot walk behind a tree and it disappeared. I can't tell you how many times. Dozens. Now this it's a report of incidents involving Skanecum. It's titled The Story of Patrick. Patrick is the son of a Skanecum and an Indian mother. Laura, age 85, member of the Lake Band, half-sister to Patrick. Frances, age 60, member of the Lake Band, Laura's daughter and Patrick's niece. My original interview with Frances took place on September 17th, 85, and was followed up further with interviews of Mother Laura, deceased in 87, at her residence in Espelum, at which time she verified the information reported by Frances and added many details. Frances pronounces Skanecum as if clearing her throat with a mouthful of saliva. Laura relates that as a child she had a much greater interest in her environment, things in general, and especially in Skanecum, than the other Indian women who she knew. She would ask questions of her grandfather and grandmother, who explained things to her and passed on many stories. As a child, from about the age 6, she would sleep outdoors and spend considerable time in the mountains alone, could identify and understand many sounds she heard, like the ee cry of a Skanecum. Turn of the century, in 1885 to 1900, the Indians set up a fishing camp near Keller on the San Poil River. In the evening, the men would return camp tired and hungry. The women would work all evening processing the fish and putting up dry racks. While cooking dinner, one of the women, recent bride through bride purchase, took a kettle and went off to get water. Minutes later, she was heard screaming. The men rushed to the scene, but could only stand and watch as she was carried off by a Skanecum. They knew that Skanecum was very vengeful, and if harmed, the captive may be injured, and the mountains would no longer be safe for any Indian. As she was carried away, she tore off and dropped pieces of her white slip, leaving a trail for the men to follow. She was with Skanecum all summer, or at least a couple of months. When the men, still searching for her on horseback, saw her gathering wild potato roots, Skanecum was asleep nearby. Upon seeing the men, she emptied her lap of the potatoes, crept quietly to them, leapt on one of the horses behind its rider, and thus escaped. Upon their return to camp, all the Indians immediately broke camp and hastily departed. During her stay with Scanicum, the woman gathered roots, etc., which they shared. Scanicum eats anything that other people eat, but lives primarily on roots such as tule or cattail plant, which they gather, dry, and store in caves. They build fires with flintstone and steal hides from Indians, which they use for bedding to cover the entrance to their caves. During her stay with Scanicum, the woman became pregnant and bore a son named Patrick, who grew up in the Colville Reservation. Patrick's body structure was very different from other Indians, as his arms were very long, reaching about to his knees. He was very short, about 5'4", possessed a sloping forehead, very large lower jaw, and very large wide mouth, with straight upper and lower lips, and a straight protruding teeth, and was kind of stooped and humpbacked. His ears were elongated. He had very large hands and long fingers. He is described as very ugly, although extremely intelligent. He attended school on the reservation, was very smart, operated a ranch in the area, died at about the age of 30. Patrick is described as a gentle man who never beat or mistreated his wife. He married easily as he had a good ranch and was considered affluent. From his marriage to Laura's cousin was born 3 daughters and 2 sons. Both sons died at an early age. The 3 daughters were named in order from oldest to youngest. The girls have wide mouths, look like split from ear to ear, protruding teeth, and squint eyes. But Madeline, who lives in Washington Coast, has had other distinct Scanicum features, such as a sloping forehead. She is considered ugly by Indian standards, is an alcoholic spending much time in bars and taverns. Patrick's wife, mother of these girls, is Laura's first cousin. Frances met Patrick when she was a young girl, about 8 years old. She reports another incident in about 82, where she and her niece were returning from Nespelem from Omak just after dark. About 2 miles from Omak, near a gravel pit, they passed a Scanicum standing alongside the road. About a year later, Frances and Laura were returning home when they stopped up on Keller Butte to eat chicken when they brought back for them. They heard Scanicum scream only a short distance away. Laura reports that some years ago she shot a deer not far from Nespelem, being alone, and at the time she was unable to load it into her car. She returned the next meeting with her grandson. Several Scanicum were on the scene. One, a female, was just standing alongside the road, never moved. She looked human, about 6 feet tall, her body covered with long brown hair, had a sloping forehead with ears, and appears to be pulled forward. Louis, a 79-year-old member of the Columbia Moses Band, knew Patrick all his life and remembers him and his family well. He worked with Patrick on his ranch from 1925 to 30. He was a very good poker player who seemed to instinctively know what everyone else was holding. And that's fascinating. Last story. Choanito. Among the Wenatchee tribes, Sasquatch or Bigfoot was known as Choanito, which in their language means night people and is pronounced Choanito. Isabel, a 100-year-old Indian woman from the Wenatchee tribe, gave the following report of an event which occurred during her grandfather's generation. In the fall of the year October, a group of male members of the tribe were on a hunting trip near Wenatchee Lake. One of the men became separated from the rest of the party and was captured by Choanito. He was taken to a cave far up Rocky Mountains and held captive by a family of them. The odor in the cave was terrible. They would not take him out hunting with them, but made him remain in camp near the cave of the woman. They were like a different tribe of Indians. In the spring, they returned to him in the place where they had captured him. Upon returning to his camp, he was immediately recognized by the children, who couldn't believe that he was back and he had gone so far and so long. They thought that he had been killed. He reported that he had been well treated by the Choanito. Now, a couple of interesting points here that I want you to remember. Disappearing behind the tree and not coming out of the canyon. Now, do I think they went into the tree? No. But they have some stealth capabilities that we don't understand. And the part, it was just a one-line sentence. When Patrick played poker, it's like he knew what the other people were holding. There's a lot of people that say that Bigfoot has the ability to almost read your mind. Is that what was going on with Patrick? And the biggest point I want you to get out of what I just read to you in that book is this was written by an anthropologist who had done a study. Every one of those tribes said it was a human. Every one. Do you realize how demeaning it is to come in with no evidence to support it and to claim it's an animal? And to completely disregard what the Native Americans say about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Chowanito, Schwanati, when they've lived with them for centuries? Do you realize how obscenely rude that is? Especially when you can't justify your position. I don't have to look hard for this stuff. But when I found it, it justifies the position we have. Now, I've given you my journey up to this point of how I got my knowledge. And it's from reputable sources. So when you leave here, when you think about this, I want you to take that common sense approach. Logical. Sensible. Somebody says Bigfoot's an animal. Well, name me an animal on Earth that we haven't shot, killed, captured, tortured. There's something different about Bigfoot. I've said this all along. And if you consider it along the lines of Dogman, and the different monsters that are talked about in society over hundreds of years, the Loch Ness Monster, etc. They're always seen, they're never captured, and they can't be studied. The commonality. Thanks for being here for the class. I hope you're enjoying it. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media. And most of all, I appreciate you. Be nice to your neighbor. If you see somebody in your parking lot somewhere, an older person, and they're having a tough time, go help them out. Hold the door for people. Smile at people in your community. Be a good villager. Thank you. You can find me on Twitter, David Paulides at Can-Am, like Canadian American, Can-Am missing. You can go to our online store at NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store, you can find our books, etc. Do not buy any of our books on Amazon. You'll get ripped off. Only buy them on our site. We don't sell on Amazon. Only resellers do. Meantime, be nice to your family. Love your family. Be safe. Paulides out.